I saw this here, this function, calculating the sum. So basically, trying to add up a bunch of numbers, 3, 5, 7, and 10. How do you make that calculator add all those numbers up? This is here written in Python. So I was going to say, how do I write that in JavaScript? JavaScript was the original language that I was trying to learn. And just like for Python, we have Google Colab. For any kind of Python practice, you can use JSFiddle. JSFiddle doesn't teach you the stuff. It doesn't give you lessons, but it gives you space to run this code. Again, if you're intimidated from installing software, getting it up and running on your system. The nice thing about JSFiddle is you don't even have to log in, but if you do create an account, you can save these files that you can reference later. Basic math in a function. This is what usually happens. The issue of translating this function from Python to JavaScript is that it's a little bit more complex than I thought it would be. And it's because I was underthinking it in my head. Because a basic math function, so we're going to add two numbers. We have a function, we're trying to add two numbers together. That's what this is saying. So we declared a function, I'm calling it add2. You can call the function whatever you want. And in this function, we're taking two numbers, number 1 and number 2. And then what we're going to do with those numbers, we're going to add those two numbers together. And then we're going to return the result. That's what this JavaScript is doing. So again, even if you don't know this language of JavaScript, the logic is the most important thing. Thinking through, like learning programming is one thing, but learning to think like a programmer, you can already get that practice on your own if you just take your time and break things down. So any kind of adding math, in this case, we're just adding two numbers, but you need to realize that there's a number 1 and number 2, and then we're going to take and return the result of those two numbers by adding them. That's what this is saying. In order to show a result, I have to do a console log. That's all that this is. And it's going to print 3 plus 4. And down here we have a 7, which is great. The problem is, if we have a bunch of numbers, it gets a little bit more complicated. Like this, I don't think anybody would have issue reading these two. Here we have to use a for loop, and even using the for loop, it gets a little wild. Let me read through what this result is, and then we'll see if we can break it down. Instead of just adding two numbers, we're trying to calculate the sum. Again, we can call this function whatever we want to, but we're going to pass through a set of numbers. Because we haven't added any numbers yet, our sum is 0, right? Our starting point is 0. This next thing that looks really, really intimidating, something called a for loop. I think most people, when they try to explain this, they try to explain it in a really scientific type of way. They try to explain it in a way that's the most quote unquote accurate. What helped me is just learning that this for let I equals 0, I is less than the numbers of length, I plus plus. What that's saying is, if we have a set of numbers, 1, 2, 3, 14, 21, 56, this text right here, this is how you scan through and note all those numbers. So like with my cursor, I'm going through this, like thinking through with my voice, I'm counting out 1, 2, 3, 14, 21, 56. That's what this for loop is doing. So this numbers.length is this entire length of this section. That's how you should think of it. And this plus plus is where we're going from 1 to 2 to 3 to 14 plus 21 plus 56. So remember, our sum is 0 at its starting point, but now we need to add each one of those numbers. So again, the logic, you understand that. This is how it looks in the code for JavaScript. This is one of many ways that you could do it. And then once we add those things up, we're going to return that sum total. As a test, we're going to try to calculate 2, 3, 6, and 21 together. And yes, I believe that total is 32, which we have in the bottom right. So a couple things that were a little tricky for me is, you notice these 3 dots here. What happens if we take these 3 dots away? That's strange. It's 0. Obviously, we have multiple numbers down here. Why is that 0? It's because in this parentheses, the logic, what if it spits out 4? Oh, very excellent question. I promise I'll get to that one just next, okay? What happens is if we just have like an arbitrary thing right here, like compared to the function I had at the top, where we distinctly have a number 1 and a number 2, very distinct count. If I change this here, let me add those 3 dots before. Let's do test 2. I just want to be able to show another set of numbers. Let's choose 3, 5, 7, 8, 9, 11, 31. So the point I'm trying to make here is this set of numbers is way longer than that first one that we just had, right? But you'll notice if I did it right, like my rig setup, I can't see. Whoa. That's okay. Let's see what this. Oh, that was my problem. And that's okay. Obviously, I'm not polished because I don't have the streaming practice. But what I've always appreciated is when I've learned coding is when the person wasn't all put together. Seeing these mistakes that I make now, even a seasoned veteran could be making these mistakes right here. They probably won't to the same level, but just knowing that, oh, even when you get well-versed in code, these are just silly, stupid mistakes. They don't mean anything. It's not a determinant of you're cut out for code, you're not cut out for code. Remember, this console log is how we get something to reflect in that area. So the reason why it wasn't showing this is because I'm only doing a console log test of this set of numbers. So if I need to do that console log, remember, I called it test 2 here, and there we go. We have this total. It shows this is 74. This is 32. And the point that I'm trying to show is that when we have these 3 dots, this means you can have whatever set of numbers you want. There's no maximum limit. That's the power of having that ... there. Now, the 7, where did that 7 come from? Oh yeah, it's because I have up here from the initial adding to function, remember, we still had this. So if I comment it out so we're not paying attention to it at all, and we run it again, then we just have 32 and 74. Now, Black's question, let's get rid of test 2. So again, we're just focusing on these set of numbers that we're trying to add up, 2, 3, 6, and 21. You know, Black brought up that good point. What about the 4? And the 4 is that numbers.length. The length is the 4. What if I made a different function here? Let's say function check length. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing. We're going to pass through ... numbers because we don't want to have to worry about any kind of limitation. And let's say here, let's, honestly, I don't think I have to write all this, but again, we're not going to worry about optimizing just yet, but our code's going to look very similar to that one up there where we're calculating the sum. So again, we have a for loop, for let I equals 0. And again, the more for loops you write, the easier it gets. Numbers.length I plus plus. And then let's just return numbers.length. Honestly, this might be the wrong spot to return numbers.length. I might need to put it after this brace here. So we're going to change this. Instead of using calculateSum, let's do this check length. Yep. And see, that's that 4 that we were talking about. The 4 counts as the length of the set. There's an asterisk to go about with that, but we'll worry about that later for another time. But for now, that's all you need to do. Black is illustrating a really good thing. Your mind is there. Like there's certain quote unquote obvious things that you're noticing, you're picking up on, but like how to piece it together in the context of the language that you're learning, that's the big thing. Like I think it was really big for me to think of it as a language, because the same thing happens when you learn Spanish, when you learn Japanese. The overall concept, like just because you learn Japanese or you learn Spanish, that doesn't mean you're going to be good at speaking it, even if you get good grammar, good vocabulary, good pronunciation, because the overall idea, what the hell do you want to say in Spanish? What the hell are you trying to say in Japanese? Where is that going to come from? If it doesn't come from you, you're going to learn those stock phrases from the books that suck, where initially people might be kind of impressed, especially if you can do it with gusto, right? You can do it with jishin, that's confidence in Japanese. But if you're just doing the same thing over and over, people aren't going to talk to you, not because you're rude, but because you're boring as hell, right? If we tie it to fighting games, whoa, fighting games are real intimidating. Whoa, they're really fast. Oh, like what should I do here? And they're like, you have to have some sort of game plan you devise on your own. Don't be too helpless. Like that's the most annoying thing if you go on Reddit or you look at all these like people who are wanting to start out. Oh, how do I get started? Like, dude, I have to tell you to have fun with a game? Like that's kind of defeating the purpose. Some other resources that I just want to mention, because initially when I got stuck, because I did not write this calculateSum function correctly the first time. People know ChatGPT. ChatGPT is great. It's also free that you can use. But there's other resources too. One that I like using, blackbox.ai. You can have it specifically go through certain, you can do it for Python. You can do it for HTML. Again, like ChatGPT doesn't need this type of separation. But if you just want a little bit more focus, like I don't see blackbox.ai being talked about very often. So I think it's worth going through. Like, this is great. You can paste a YouTube link and it'll summarize it. That's pretty dope. I don't want to be flexing skills that I don't necessarily have. It was giving me 3 options to do this. If you're not going to use the ... So let's go back where this is a little bit more readable. Let's comment out that length check. Let's go back. Let's make this back calculateSum. And remember, okay, so we still have ... So let's just make sure that it's running. Yep, it's showing 32 here. If I take out the ... and again, it's not running 32 properly, it's running a 0. What we have to do is, like, when we're giving the calculator the numbers that we want to use, we have to change how we're feeding it. So instead of 2, 3, 6, 21, I have to put an extra set of braces around it. And then we have the 32 there. And don't get too caught up on the lingo here, but this is now an array. So we're passing through an array, and if we use it as an array, we don't need the ... That's just the rules. So for me, like having to remember to add braces around it, I think that's less practical as long as you can do ... And then the third thing is, what if you don't put anything in there to begin with? If you look at this function, we're suggesting that we're going to be taking numbers, right? And then remember that for loop, we're scanning through that set of numbers and then we're adding them together. What if we don't even give that indicator? In a way, the code's not quite sure what to expect. So to kind of brace ourselves for that, instead of trying to label it, that's when we use the term arguments. This is kind of like your generic tool. And with arguments, I don't think you need the brace. Let's see. Yep, and we got 32 again. So these are just 3 ways that you can run that calculate function, whichever one's easier for you. And then like when you're in a working environment, trying to kind of see how everyone else is writing their code. But the main thing is, like, what if you only knew one of those ways to do it? The overall logic of, hey, we're going to be taking a set of numbers. We need to make sure that we note every single one of them. And then once we identify them, we need to add them all up together. That's just how you basically break it down. So as long as you can think that way, this function, it's basic enough that if you go to Blackbox or ChatGPT, it can like immediately give you a solution. But I would encourage you, for your own learning practice, do as much as you can with that logical thought and flow. And when you describe it to ChatGPT or any kind of AI tool, and you say, I don't know what to do next. Like, once it gives you that solution, man, it's going to stick in your head so much better, right? If we apply it to watching your replays in Tekken, you say, oh man, I don't know what to do. I got smoked here. I keep getting perfected. Well, can you identify anything specifically? Like, oh, I thought I was doing really good. I launch punished, I juggled them for a bit, but then when I got to the wall, they throw reversaled me. And then from that point on, because I'm not comfortable with player 2 side, I don't know what to do. Well, that's a lot more information there. That's a lot better than I just don't know what to do at all. And you got to think of using these AI tools in the same type of way.